Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelsey Marie. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kelsey Marie Pirine, and I currently serve as the president for the Southern University NAACP, as well as the president of the Louisiana State Conference for the Youth and College Division. I am a current senior at Southern University majoring in political science, and I would like to thank all of you, as well as all of our candidates, for attending tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Xavier Kent. I'm a sophomore at Louisiana State University, currently serving as a Freedom Fund co-chair for LSU's NAACP chapter, and as the political action chair of Louisiana's NAACP Youth and College Division. Before we begin this town hall, I will now give each candidate the opportunity to introduce themselves to the audience. Please feel free to provide your name, where you're from, and any other information you would like the audience to know. We would like to limit this to 1 minute per candidate. We can start with Mr. J. Christopher Johnson.
All right, warm greetings and humble salutations, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to have me and to discuss more of the issue items that I uniquely align with you. I'm 25 years old. I am the youngest candidate in this race, and so I definitely want to encourage you all in whatever pursuits that you do have to definitely pursue them beyond the rigors of life. But nonetheless, I'm not bought, I'm not bossed, I'm not for sale, and I align too far with the real life issues of the people of the 2nd Congressional District than many of the people in this race. And so I can't wait to discuss more about my platform as we discuss and you ask questions, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you all tonight.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Lorette. So happy to be here. Thank you for hosting this. I'm originally from Metairie, raised in Old Jefferson, and I currently live in New Orleans, right on Napoleon. I ran to make a district in all of Louisiana. Every race, every creed, every sexual orientation. I'm running inequality in our justice for too long. Running for lots of different things, and I'm running to bring science to COVID. Try and get some feedback here. And I'm running to bring science to the COVID equation. Thank you.
Again, thank you to all the candidates that were able to make it out here tonight to speak to the young people of Louisiana. So now we will get into our discussion. We have composed some questions based off of topics that are popular among youth Louisiana voters. Each topic will be discussed for a maximum of 15 minutes each. After each topic is discussed, each candidate will be able to answer each specific question posed by the moderators. They will have 3 minutes to answer each question. Finally, we'll open up the floor to the audience for their questions, as well as some candidate-specific questions based off of their platforms. Our goal is to turn this into a discussion rather than just a panel. Without further ado, let us get started.
We will now begin. The first topic that we will discuss is COVID-19. Many legislators across the country have released different COVID relief plans, and many have supported different plans. The first question or statement is to explain in detail your proposed COVID relief plan or any plans that you support. We can start with Mr. Lorette, since Mr. Johnson introduced himself first.
Thank you so much again. I have the most detailed COVID plan of any other candidate. First of all, lockdowns do not work. Lockdowns hurt people and overall kill people. We need to protect the vulnerable. Vulnerable people need to stay isolated and go out in small numbers and get plenty of exercise. So we need to antibodies testing at a mass scale, and people have the option to opt in to publish their antibodies testing. And with this, they are more free to go back to work and reopen the economy. We need to get more shots and more arms quickly. I'm fortunate enough to have both of my shots because I'm a military veteran. Is that fair? Perhaps not, but it was my time to get one. I was asked to, so I did. But in addition, people that are vulnerable and they can't meet with a congressman in person or come to one of my district offices, I'm going to have a mobile office that comes out to every parish that's covered in my district. For those people that are still a little bit query about meeting in a mobile office, if they want to have a congressional meeting, we're going to ship them a tablet to do congressional meetings if the situation warrants a congressional visit. We need to reopen the economy and we need to get people back to work. Thank you.
So the American Rescue Plan has now become law. The $1.9 trillion relief plan, a survival plan, has been written into law as of today by President Biden. It's very long overdue. However, it's very skeletal as well. I think that the people are worth so much more than a one-time $1,400 compromise check. I do support $2,000 retroactive survival checks extended 3 months beyond the pandemic. We also need to look at what does a real housing moratorium look like, because long even before this pandemic was there a great crisis in the 2nd Congressional District as it pertains to housing. And there was always a draft of some type of plan or a strategic plan, but nothing actually actualized itself. And so we need to make sure that we are providing a true moratorium on evictions without the possibility of a property owner bringing you to court. But we also need to make sure that we're taking care of the property owner as well, to have a mortgage deferment, so they don't have to be immediately responsible for that bill, because I do understand that they are making a living for themselves as well. But no one should be placed on the street. We need to expand vaccination and testing and diminish the barriers that are prohibiting the most vulnerable people in communities from receiving the treatment they need. And so with that, we need to also focus on prioritizing Medicare for all and also expanding the wage gap and raising the tip minimum wage as well as the federal minimum wage.
Thank you. And we will also ask another question in terms of COVID-19. Louisiana is currently ranked 30th in vaccine distributions. What are your plans to continue to support so that Louisiana can constantly increase in the number of vaccines that are distributed? And a part B to that can be, what groups should legislators and policymakers consider and not overlook as vaccines are being distributed? We can start with Mr. Johnson.
Uniquely, New Orleans specifically is the lowest in the nation as it pertains to the statistics of who was getting COVID, and then the highest for those who are receiving the vaccination, which is very unique. That's interesting to me, just looking at the culture of New Orleans, but it's very evident that we have a festive culture. And so we will see that we will want people to be vaccinated so people can get back in the streets and try to normalize this thing we call life. Nonetheless, we need to prioritize the people that this pandemic hit the most, because at this point it has become a racial justice issue, because now we're looking at Black and brown people who are now considered essential, being dragged into places where they can't even qualify for a vaccination. There's an issue with that. And so we need to make sure that we are diminishing barriers so individuals who are actually at the front lines are getting their treatment and care first. Of course, we need to pay attention to all of our frontline workers directly, as they will be socially identified, but also those individuals who prioritize our everyday life. And so I believe Governor John Bel Edwards or the president by May 1st is going to allow for all adults to get the vaccination. But that's a start. But we need to prioritize the people who have been systemically neglected, who have been financially stifled, and who have been put in a place where they have to make decisions whether or not to scratch and survive. And so we need to prioritize the people in that capacity and have a better response rate to the most vulnerable yet most valuable people.
Thank you. I agree. We need to get shots and the most vulnerable as quickly as possible. However, that's easier said than done. the fact of the matter is we need to get more shots and more arms at a very rapid basis. And quite frankly, it doesn't have to be 2 shots. The United Kingdom has taken a stance that they're going to delay the vaccination, the 2 vaccinations apart. I'm not stating that the United States should do that, but it's more important that people either A, recover from COVID, or 2, get their first vaccine. That's why antibodies testing is so important. And while it's very important that we get shots in the arms of vulnerable people, especially the elderly, we're often missing the point that younger people are having direct interaction with elderly people. One of the most efficient ways that we can get shots in more arms is via people that are already in hospitals or jails and prisons that are soon to be released. Or not, we need to get more shots and more arms. However we can get shots and more arms most effectively is the way to go. In a few months, hopefully, this won't even be a discussion anymore. Once everybody in the country that would like to get a vaccine has received a vaccine. So, but groups, we need to take care of the vulnerable, including the elderly, but young people have interactions with the elderly as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your answers. So we have one last question that we want to go into this section. Mr. Johnson, you actually spoke a little bit about this, about how the pandemic has truly shown us about the racial injustices that are occurring in all of our systems, especially in the healthcare system. So we would like to ask, how are you going to ensure in your position, if selected as the, or elected as the congressman for Louisiana District 2, to ensure that people see healthcare as a right and not a privilege? And we'll start with Mr. Lorette.
Nobody should be denied health care. And I mean, if you get sick or injured, it's important that everybody have access to health care. So, you know, at the same time, healthcare, healthcare insurance need to not just simply be offered to people that have crossed in and broke the law to get into this coverage. However, even those people should be offered health care, but perhaps maybe get a bill later on for it. So one thing that my opponent and I do differ on is Medicare or Medicaid for all. I do not want to disband private insurance. Right now, many people are very happy with the insurance they have. But much of our district does not make enough money to pay for private insurance, and they qualify for Medicaid or if they're older, Medicare. So I'm absolutely for increasing the criteria that allows more people to qualify for both Medicaid and Medicaid, therefore offering the insurance to more populations.
Thank you for the question. Obviously, being a Black man in America, my life is very much so in alignment with the direct question that's been asked. As an individual that has a degree and a full-time job with a salary, but don't have health care insurance because it would take too much of my check on a bi-weekly basis. And then I make too much money to qualify for government-sponsored insurance. Is an issue. No one should be denied health care insurance. Now, where Mr. Lorette does have me wrong, well, I do support Medicare for all. I do also support individuals having their own private insurance. I have no issue with that. However, we do need to make sure that practices and medical practices are being regulated as equitably as somebody receiving Medicare sponsored by the government, as if somebody had one of these major private health insurance groups. Okay, it's very much so evident that this thing has prioritized the vulnerability and preyed upon the most weak as it pertains to racial disparities. We're talking directly to the Black community, because statistically speaking, the Black community is already delayed, not denied, but very much so delayed, and systemically are only working so many types of jobs. And it's very much so unfortunate that people would like people to only have health care insurance on the back of their labor. That is an issue. No one should have to work so much that they're forcing themselves into a medical situation. That's absolutely ludicrous. And so there should be no type of privilege in regards to one having health care. It is a human right. And this pandemic is proven very much so evident that there are things that do not have bias. And even with pre-existing health care conditions and health conditions, we need to make sure that government is also taking care of those people, because everybody matters. And we don't know when the next thing is going to come. So we got to prioritize the people in all decision making that we're doing.
Thank you. So we were able to have a representative from Gary Chambers' campaign come in. So I will allow him to come on stage as well and to speak a little bit about what Gary's plans is in regards to COVID. And please introduce yourself to the audience as well.
No, my name is, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Gotcha. Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Thompson. I'm the deputy campaign manager for Mr. Gary Chambers. I'm delighted to be here. So if someone can give me what the question is, I'll respond as best I can.
So the question that was posed is, tell us a little bit about Gary's COVID relief plan in regards to healthcare as well as economic and just relieving the burdens of the pandemic. And you have 2 minutes to respond.
No problem. Thank you so much. As everyone knows, we are supportive of universal healthcare. We're also supportive of direct checks coming directly to our constituents, United States citizens, and even those who contribute to the United States. We are supporter of what just passed in legislation that President Biden signed today. However, we believe that it should go further. We believe that in universal basic income, we believe that small businesses should be supported, because we all know that there are large corporations. However, small business is what makes this country go. Again, we are supporters of universal health care. We are supporter of the package that was just signed. We believe that it should go further, and we are supporter of anyone that is in need of payment, PPE, payment protection plans, and other small business loans, but as well as grants. That is the position of the Chambers campaign.
Thank you so much for joining us today, as well as answering our question. Next, we'll go into financing our communities. So minimum wage has been a very big topic, especially since the onset of the pandemic, and making sure that people are being given a livable wage when it comes to being able to afford food, clothes, housing, and whatnot. So our question is, how important is it increasing the minimum wage to ensure that sufficient payment is given to all employees, and why we should not keep the minimum wage as it is now? And we'll start with Mr. Lorette.
Thank you. So I have a slightly different take on this issue. So I'm already on record that I don't necessarily support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour like many of my fellow candidates do. However, I'm a strong believer that this virus that originated out of Wuhan, China, if it has a direct impact on your employment, you need to be compensated. And by the way, we've had a low unemployment rate or underemployment rate long before this most recent pandemic. I am in big favor of expanding unemployment insurance to include more groups and make you more easily eligible. Now, having said that, I'm fully aware that the implementation of unemployment has been a complete disaster, and people have been waiting months in some cases to receive unemployment compensation. However, people need to be making a little bit closer to whole than they are currently. That's why I support a stimulus bump for unemployed workers who are directly affected by this pandemic that was no fault of anybody in America. Because I'm an America First candidate, the only America First candidate, and I support supporting America First. I do increase a minimum wage increase, a phased-in increase over time, but $15 an hour, I believe, will put many small businesses out of work. So that's probably, if I had to guess, probably where myself and my other fellow candidates here may feel a little bit differently about the topic. But an unemployment bump, I support 100%, especially if unemployed due to this virus from Wuhan, China?
We don't need a bump. And I really could care less where the pandemic has originated. I know that it's here. And so we need to make sure that we are paying attention to that. Inflation in the salaries that we're making is not able to keep up with the cost of living, with the cost to survive. Like I was mentioning before, tipped wages since 1991 have been $2.13. Those people who are serving your meals at the dinner table, housing bartenders, those individuals there. And if you don't tip them, their wages are eaten by taxes easily. So for the past 30 years, we cannot support individuals who are making Louisiana's economy go round. I have an issue with that. For the past 10 years, $7.25 has been the federal minimum. The state of Louisiana has no minimum. And so we automatically abide by the federal minimum. That is no way to live. Whenever the fair market value for an efficiency apartment in the city of New Orleans is $765, you really expect somebody to survive and thrive off of $7.25 before taxes? No. So the reason that it sounds like a lot is because our legislators and lawmakers have been neglecting our people for far too long and should have been incrementing an increase to the minimum wage. And actually $15 is the compromise because that's still scratching to survive. All right. Now, I do understand that it may have a disproportionate reality to small business owners, but we need to also make sure that we're drafting legislation for provisions for the success and the survival of the small business owner while supporting the individual who needs that $15 an hour. And so I wholeheartedly and fully support a minimum wage increase, and that's something that's going to have to incrementally increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking directly to the issue, we're running for the 2nd Congressional District. In the 2nd Congressional District, the median income for families of four is about $35,000 a year. Of that $35,000, or of the 2nd Congressional District, the majority of that make less than $15,000 a year. That's unacceptable. We know when we're talking about the jobs that are in this 2nd Congressional District, they are service industry jobs. If someone's making less than $15,000 a year, then you already know they're making probably about $7 and some change an hour. That's unacceptable. So yes, we support the $15 an hour. However, it is not on pace with inflation. In fact, it should be about $19 an hour. That's exactly what our candidate supports of rising with inflation. So again, yes, $15 an hour is a compromise. I agree. We agree with that, but we've taken a step further and think that it should be about $19 an hour. And it should be connected directly to inflation in this country. As well, speaking to the issue of unemployment, unemployment gets a little tricky because it only accounts for those who are actually applying for unemployment. So it doesn't count everyone in every instance. The employment, as we know, for Black folks is a lot higher than what it is recorded. In fact, unemployment is higher than what it is recorded for all folks. So again, we support the $15 an hour. We believe that it should go a lot further than that. It should be tied to inflation.
Thank you for that answer. Our second question is, in what ways do you plan to use your position to increase the opportunity for Black small businesses? As we know that Black entrepreneurship is on the rise in this country, and we want to ensure that our Black business owners, especially our Black small business owners, are given the opportunity to succeed. So how will you use your position to plan to increase that opportunity for our Black small business owners? And we can start with Mr. Thompson.
As referred to in previous discussions and previous forums and debates, we believe that the Biden administration, and we've gotten wind that they're going to pass a large infrastructure bill. With the infrastructure bill, there's going to be an opportunity for contracts to be divided up amongst others, minorities, Blacks, those in our district. So we are a big supporter of the Green New Deal. We believe that the infrastructure deal that is going to be tied to the Green New Deal is going to come directly to our district, and believe that those contracts are going to be directly tied, and we're going to make sure that the legislation that is passed or the rules that are written ties to those in our district that can do the plumbing, that can do the contract work, that can do the building of the solar panels and all other things that are associated with that large infrastructure bill that is coming in.
Thank you. So I'm not sure how many of you guys are already aware of this, but I'm the high-tech candidate here. I've worked for big tech most of my life. I'm not a professional politician. And one thing that's very frustrating to me is that the 2nd Congressional District, New Orleans and the surrounding areas, all the way to Baton Rouge, East and West Baton Rouge, and most of Louisiana is relatively low tech. We need to increase the knowledge level of people that are in our district. And what I'm in favor of is more B2B, more business to business transactions. And the more we increase the technical level of our district, we can do more business to business and increase the high tech transactions. There's no reason why small business owners here in Louisiana can't do more business with people either out of state or out of country. We're still getting the tax dollars. We're still getting the jobs right here in Louisiana, even if it means working from home. One of the things we're missing right now hugely is education and training. I am the technology candidate, and I want to enable the people in our district to have better access to both of those, education and training, and give tax breaks to business owners. Thank you.
Awesome. So we need to make sure that we are advocating for small business survival grants and not loans. We need loan cancellation. People in this pandemic, especially right now, are in dire need of financial support and financial support on an equitable level. And so it's very much so imperative to me that we are supplying people with the means to survive even now and then beyond that. But all over the district, you're looking at a lack of overall development. And you're looking at an influx in crime due to a lack of development as well. It's all intersexual, it's all interrelated. So we need to make sure that we're advocating for direct funding for development, specifically for the small Black business owners, and also making sure that we are drafting legislation to reduce the barriers to get small business loans as well. Because it's very much so difficult for one to try to open a business and have everything in alignment when there's a systemic structure that is placing a barrier between you and your success. And so it's very imperative to me that we are prioritizing the backbones of our communities and our economies and all things we do, because it saddens and disheartens me when every other week there's talks about a closure of a historical place that has been a communal space for somebody for a long time. So we need to make sure that we're supporting our small Black business owners and granting them the financial equitable opportunities that we afford to everyone else.
Thank you. Now we proceed to our next section.
Our next topic of discussion will be education. Year after year, Louisiana is consistently ranked one of the lowest states when it comes to education. How do you plan to rectify and improve the Louisiana's education system's downfalls? You can begin with Mr. Johnson.
Am I unmuted? Okay. The education system in Louisiana is trash. It's absolutely ridiculous. And we have to identify for that. And we have individuals who are a part of this race, who are already in the Senate, that have been architects of science experiments and social science experiments with our young people, and treating our folks as profit shares and stocks in a seat, rather than investments to be deposited into. And so for me, I do support a moratorium on the expansion of charter schools nationally, but it's very much so unfortunate that the city of New Orleans specifically is governed by all charter systems. So you're telling me in one parish, we have over 30 something little school systems running in one? That's absolutely ludicrous. The 1F system, to say that a student can go here or catch a bus from this part of the city to that part of the city, that's absolutely ridiculous. And so we're not even conscientious of how that is the place in people and how is this place in community. I would also advocate for a universal educational plan and curriculum. When we talk about standardized tests, you can go from Louisiana to Texas and people know different things and are on different levels. We should not be having these types of conversations. When you travel to other countries and you study comparative political ideology, you understand this person knows this, that person knows that, and there's a synchronization as it pertains to the advancement of one's liberation as well. And so we need to make sure that the autonomy is given directly to the parish and to the school board, that the state has no control, and that we are prioritizing our young people and our students rather than fulfilling profit goals.
Next, we'll have Mr. Thompson.
Can you guys hear me? Gotcha. What I first would encourage everyone to do is to go to chambersforcongress.com. We have a detailed action item on our website for our priorities. To just mention a few of those, we believe that we should do away with standardized testing. Obviously, one's potential and one's capabilities has nothing to do with the test. We know that. Those tests are culturally biased. One thing that I do want to highlight that we fully support is subsidizing and encouraging more Black male teachers in K-5 education. We know that when the teacher looks like the person that is being taught to, that you have higher achievement goals that can be reached. So if we can support things like, teachers being subsidized to come in, teach for America, things of that nature, then we can also support Black male teachers being brought back into our neighborhoods to teach our young males. Again, if someone is getting taking out loans, then we should be recruiting those Black male teachers to come into our neighborhoods, and we should be subsidizing them. We also supporting of not just a free and appropriate public education, but a free and appropriate public education and training. So we believe in partnering and leveraging our position from the federal government and subsidizing or sending resources to the local river parishes. There's River Parish Community College, so we believe in having satellite campuses in the river parishes to provide not just education, but training. That way people get access to certificates and we can prepare for the Green New Deal. Thank you.
It's an interesting question because, yes, Louisiana ranks one of the lowest in the country in education. We also rank one of the highest when it comes to incarceration rates. And education and incarceration are tightly coupled. Besides being a student in Louisiana myself, having grown up in Jefferson Parish, I don't think I've got much more of an insight that I could have received into the education system than I worked personally for the Jefferson Parish public school system as an IT person. I believe that the teacher needs to be very quality teacher that, for lack of a better term, can explain the concept 8 ways from Sunday to the student, because you can explain it one way, 2 or 3 ways, and the student may not get it. So the person needs to be able to relate to the student and relay it. We need to bring high tech into the classroom. That is critical. That is something we're not doing today. We are 20 to 30 years behind in this district in most areas. We need to fix that immediately. When it comes to both K through 12 and higher education, again, I am the only America First candidate on this ballot. I have no problems approving, passing, co-sponsoring, or authoring federal grant money to help with education. That is one of the most important issues that we could possibly deal with. But technology and increasing even the usability of technology for our students is critically important, and we need to attract good teachers just like we need to attract good police officers. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question that we're going to ask is, the current student debt loan for the United States is currently $1.7 trillion and growing each and every day. Many studies have shown that student debt is not only an economic issue, but a racial and social justice issue, and it needs to be canceled. How will you advocate and fight for the cancellation for student debt in Washington, D.C.? Can begin with Mr. Lorette.
So there's been a lot of scandals actually involving this particular matter. So there's reasonable student debt, then there's very unreasonable student debt. There's some well-known private universities that have gone to court regarding this. In those situations, I'm not going to mention the specific university names. I do agree that debt should be canceled. However, some very reasonable community colleges, I think that they're relatively reasonable. But again, like I said in the previous question, I am very much for not only just loans, but federal grant money to assist with education.
I guess I'll go next. Hey, listen, I'm a person with student loan debt, so I understand that this is an issue, right? So first, we believe in the Chamber's campaign that higher education should be free, especially at public schools, right? So public schools receive tax dollars from the everyday tax-paying citizen, and so there's no reason that these schools are being subsidized with tax dollars, and then you turn around there to take out 6 figures in debt. So we believe that higher education should be free, kind of similar to a public school education that you get from K to 12 and compulsory education. We also believe that student loan debt should be more than $50,000. So we've already talked about going to Congress and not having any preset relationships, so we have no quorums, or we're not shy about pushing the current administration about wiping out more than $50,000 in student loan debt. So those are things that we support. Again, we support higher education public education should be free to all those who want to attend public education at the higher level. We also believe that the current administration should be pushing for more than $50,000 in student loan debt, because let's be real, the studies show that if you're Black, that you're likely to have more than $50,000 in student loan debt, especially if you've gone to grad school like myself.
Cancel it. Cancel all of it. All of that, cancel it. There's a majority, there's a vast amount of individuals who have student loan debt who don't even have a degree because they could not continue their education. They couldn't afford it. We were talking about individuals who say that a community college is reasonable. That's talking from a privileged experience. And so we need to afford everybody the opportunity for an accessible pathway for education. And so that's why I fully support the College for All action that is already drafted by Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Pramila Jayapal that does say we're going to cancel $50,000, even though I do support the cancellation of it all. But it also says that we are going to provide funding for free college because we're going to be taxing the rich like we should have been doing a long time ago, so that it has no barrier to the one who is trying to advance their education, because now our job market is calling for one to have an advanced education. And in doing so, in the next 10 years, will we also have the opportunity to close the wealth gap just by this one initiative, this one act, to close the wealth gap between Blacks and whites by 60%. And so we need to make sure that we are granting people, especially young people, the opportunity to have economic mobility and not be stifled by neglect due to a financial situation that one can't get themselves out of because simply the system is not giving us the same accessible opportunities to keep up to get ourselves out of it. So I fully support student debt cancellation as well as free college.
Thank you for those answers. Now we will jump into climate change as well as environmental justice. So we just got off the land of a winter storm that the state was utterly not prepared for, that the South was just utterly not prepared for. We have Cancer Alley that is destroying our Black communities, our lower income communities as well. And we are dealing with hurricane after hurricane coming off of a season that was just totally debilitating to the state of Louisiana. And so how will you plan to address climate change's impact on Louisiana and the country? And we can start with Mr. Johnson.
See, that winter storm came and they were threatening to cut off people's powers. That wasn't because the system couldn't take it. That's because they didn't want to have to pay for it. and foot the bill, because legally you can't overcharge and have certain overcharges in that capacity. And so that in itself is a racial justice issue. Nonetheless, we're talking about people in Cancer Alley or the Chemical Corridor, who is a huge chunk of Louisiana 2nd Congressional District that has been neglected for a very long time now. I do support a Green New Deal. I don't support the Green New Deal that's already drafted because it's very skeletal, and we have to address a lot more than what's already in there. But I do support a Green New Deal. I also support a moratorium on any expansion of the fossil fuel industry, because we need to prioritize the health of the people, especially the folks who look like me, who are majority Black, who are working these plants, who are more susceptible to heinous health conditions than other populations, right? That's why I also support Medicare for all, but I also support a 1-for-1 job replacement act. So for every job that I'm advocating to eliminate from the fossil fuel industry, because that's what I'm doing, because it's killing people, I also advocate for clean and renewable jobs, tech jobs, infrastructure jobs, so that we are not affecting the finances of individuals, but we are prioritizing people's health, and we're also giving them an opportunity to still economically thrive. And also we need to pay attention to the people in New Orleans in Gordon Plaza, who has been on a chemical, who's been housed on chemicals for the past 30 years. They need reparation. They need to have fully funded reallocation of funding for their transition, because people are dying on toxic soil. So we got to prioritize the people, because we're too much focused on a profit rather than we are about the well-being of the individuals who even make this district thrive.
So we are in a heavily impacted area by climate issues here in Louisiana, especially southern Louisiana and the 2nd Congressional District. Katrina, and as we all well know, other major storms has claimed numerous lives, women, men, and children, completely devastating. We have so many low-lying areas in this district that are not covered by levees currently, or the levees that are there are quite frankly just pathetic. We need to put a heavy investment into our levee system and protect those areas and our low-lying areas, which we have a lot of. I'm all for solar energy, absolutely. I am all for tax credits, tax grants for solar energy users and customers. Right now, what we're seeing is a situation where corporate America is performing audits where they are passing the audits very clearly. But the fact is, all they're doing is checking a box. They're not looking at the deeper issues and the how and why they're passing these audits. These companies need to be looked at deeper, and we need to have either federal employees or very well-respected third-party agencies involved in these audits that are looking deeper into how they're polluting our economy. Companies need to be held accountable for their actions. Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
Can you guys hear me? This is my feed is kind of choppy. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Again, if I break up, my apologies. I'm in a bad reception area. My apologies for that. As you guys all know, we're a supporter of the Green New Deal. If you go to our website, our priorities are laid out there, and we actually have a very detailed plan for the 2nd Congressional District. If you read the Green New Deal, it is a racial, social justice, progressive document that talks about environmental justice. We talk about environmental justice in our priorities. That being said, we are for fully funding the environmental justice grassroots portion of the EPA. We are for tighter, stiffer regulations. We are for holding folks accountable. Climate change is real, and in the state of Louisiana, there's no better place to see that. I mean, there's no better place than the state of Louisiana to know that climate change is real. We believe in a moratorium on more petrochemical companies in Cancer Alley, because we know that in Cancer Alley, it is Black folks that are being affected. So when we talk about climate change and support of the Green New Deal, when we talk about lowering carbon emissions, there is no other campaign other than ours that fully supports an environmental justice agenda, a Green New Deal, and holding folks accountable. We do not take any money from big corporations, the petrochemical industry, which would be a testament to where it is that we're going to go with this campaign once we get to Congress. So yes, we know that climate change is real. We support the Green New Deal. We're all about environmental justice. We're all about racial justice and social justice. And that is the position of Mr. Chambers and the campaign.
Thank you very much. Our next question is, when infrastructure is redone, lower income communities are an afterthought, yet they're the hardest hit by natural disasters, riddled with potholes and broken sidewalks. How will you ensure that lower income communities are helped first when infrastructure marked funds are being brought to the state? And we'll start with Mr. Lorette.
Yes, there is a lot of injustice, racial injustice happening when it comes to these funds. We need to correct that immediately. All people should be treated equally and fairly. Absolutely. And that includes funding. I would do everything I can do to create an environment where all voices are heard, understood, and taken care of equally. One person should not be discriminated against because of their race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. So we need to make sure that occurs in the questionnaires and the qualification for certain funding. They need to be sure that these questions look deep enough so that landlords that are making money off these properties can't qualify for funding that's intended for people that are getting money for residential areas. And yes, certain communities have been impacted from a racial injustice perspective, and that needs to be corrected immediately.
Gentrification is real, y'all. I got it, Mr. Thompson. Gentrification is real, y'all. But gentrification is not always a bad thing. It's simply development. But what we often do is neglect the people when we're talking about what we're developing and how it's going to affect anybody. And so when we're talking about urban and regional development, we have to talk about those things that are actually going to create inequities in how one's mobility looks like, what one's street looks like, what the development of one's community looks like. We need to make sure that we are taking into account equitable disbursement of funds when it talks about natural disasters occurring. Our communities that are hit are Black and brown communities that don't have the money to even rebuild their homes. Yeah, these people are still the people who are most disadvantaged. And so I'll be fully advocating for those areas that are most economically disadvantaged and that have been hit the most to make sure that those areas are taken care of. Even beyond District 2, Louisiana as a whole, we incur things. And so as I prioritize the people of the district, I'm prioritizing the state and ultimately the nation, because the people's lives are on the line. Louisiana and the 2nd Congressional District, we hold a lot right here that the whole country thrives off of. And when this is put into jeopardy, so do other things fall out of alignment. And so it's very imperative to me that we are prioritizing funding in those communities that are hit with the greatest disparities. And we see that evidently. You drive through the streets, you know, it's easy to bust your tire because you didn't ran into something. So we need to make sure that we're providing funds the places that they need the most.
+60% of this district is Black. Can you guys hear me? Yes, 60+% of this district is Black, right? When we talked about earlier, the statistics that I stated earlier, $35,000 median income in this district, and the large portion that makes under $15,000 a year, right? So when we talk about being the representative for this district, you can't run from the fact that race is an issue. You can't run from the fact that class is an issue, right? You can't run from the fact that if you're going to represent this district, then you're absolutely going to be advocating for those communities to receive those federal dollars in addressing the infrastructure issue. So what we can tell you is that based on our priorities, based on the position that Mr. Chambers has always held, not just in this position as a candidate, but as an advocate for North Baton Rouge, for Louisiana, for Black Baton Rouge, for Black Louisiana, for oppressed Louisiana, and other folks who are considered the marginal people in this state. You can guarantee you that when we decide to step into this race, we know exactly what we're getting into. We know exactly who we're representing, and we're going to do that when we get to Congress, and it's going to be unapologetic.
Thank you. The next section, or the next sector we'll be getting into is political/criminal justice reform. How you use your position and platform to actively bring attention to police and criminal justice reform that needs to occur across the state and country and create effective legislation in order to handle these situations. We can begin with Mr. Thompson.
Great. So again, if you go to our website, you look at priorities. We don't talk about defunding the police. We talk about smart funding of the police. The number one thing that we're talking about addressing here is criminal justice reform. When you talk about the military grade weapons that are being brought into our communities, listen, this isn't some other country. This isn't some occupied territory. So we should not be seeing tanks. We should not be seeing riot gear. We should not be things that looks like you're in Beirut or some type of conflict zone in our communities. These police departments are funded by our tax dollars, and they're there to protect and serve. So one of the major things that we talk about in smart funding of the police is getting rid of military grade weapons in our communities. We shouldn't be seeing tanks in our communities. The other thing we talked about in addressing in our platforms and our priorities is training for officers and making sure that we have proper allocation for police departments. We should have social workers. We should have folks with PhDs in psychology to go out and address mental health crises. Not all the time do you need to have a police response, but that also works in the counter. Police officers should be responding when they're absolutely needed for crime, not for mental health crises. So again, if you go to our priorities, if you go to our website and look at our priorities, we talk about smart funding of the police, not defunding of the police, getting rid of militarized police. Again, there's a thing that all people should look up called posse incomitatus. That should not be, that is a real thing. We should address those things. We believe in smart funding and smart allocation of funds to make sure that we have social workers and other mental health professionals coupled with the police department to respond to these mental health crises that we're seeing in our communities.
I invite everybody to go back and refer to the Power and Justice Forum. While I don't agree with everything that was just said from the Gary Chambers campaign, if you look on record, Mr. Chambers is on record stating that there are 13 law enforcement agencies in his parish. The crime is high. He doesn't see a need for law enforcement officers. Basically, 100% defunding the police. Refer back to that forum to see his comments directly. What I'm for is accountability, absolute accountability. I'm on record as stating that many law enforcement officers in our district, and I specifically called out the 8th district in New Orleans, many of them should be fired. I use those exact words. Not all of them. Many of them are good officers. I also referred to the city of Plano, Texas, as a good example of how you can attract and keep good law enforcement officers to both pay them well and train them over time. So we need to take care of our law enforcement officers and make sure that they have a good career path so they want to stay in law enforcement, and it's not just a temporary job. The 2nd Congressional District does not want to defund the police. They want to have a police response when somebody busts in their back window and calls the police, instead of how in some cases it takes a day or two to even get a report taken. That's the situation currently going on in New Orleans and other jurisdictions. We do not want to defund the police in this district. We want to pay them appropriately and have decent officers working for us. We are under a federal consent decree currently in New Orleans. It's terrible. We are not being aggressive enough. We need to take action and hold these law enforcement agencies accountable and hire good police officers. Thank you very much.
Defund the police. I support defunding the police. I fully support defunding the police because our police budget is overinflated, and I don't believe giving a cookie to a bad cop. A lot of times our police budget is also composed of bonuses and other supplements given to officers when it needs to be going into the investment of our community. When you defund the police, you fund the people. And so I also do support for social workers and individuals to be a part of a street team to address certain mental health issues as well as addiction issues as well. Somebody should not be thrown in a cell because they are battling something mentally. And so whenever you change the economy and whenever you change the education sector, ultimately one's behavior begins to change. And so, yes, Mr. Lorette, when somebody wants to hit my back window, do I want to call the police for them to respond? Yes, because that's what they need to do in that capacity and not respond falsely to criminal injustice. That if our communities were developed and if our education systems were developed, especially in New Orleans East and the lower Ninth Ward, their attention would not have to be falsely there because we're actually investing in community. And so, yeah, when I call the police, yeah, I'm expecting them to come too. And not for them to take all day when they want to come, because you still have to regard me as an individual. But I very much support allocation for social services and support services, but also for community development, where we have specifically in New Orleans, we have the highest crime rate in New Orleans East. Why? Because there's not no school in sight and there is no development besides a dollar store. You're not granting people opportunity. And so when you got to scratch to survive, and when you really just got to make it, and people don't even want to give you a job because you might have something on your record, something is wrong and something is problematic. So I support the funding of police and allocating monies appropriately to the aforementioned places that I mentioned before. Thank you.
If I could, real quick, someone, a candidate here stated something that was incorrect. So I believe in making, as an attorney, I believe in making sure that the record is set clear about our positions and things that were said, right? He talked about 13 police agencies. In fact, what Mr. Chambers says that there were 11 police agencies. He didn't talk about defunding the police and getting rid of the police. What he said was that there are 11 police agencies in East Baton Rouge Parish, and yet there's high crime. What he said was that clearly 11 police agency and over-policing isn't working. And so we talked about is consolidating those police departments and doing things the correct way. So what I would ask is that if a candidate is going to state something that he believed to be fact, that there is indeed true fact. So let's make sure that the record is clear about that, about what the position of our candidate is and what our campaign supports, which is smart funding of the police. And we use an example that there are 11 police agencies in East Baton Rouge Parish, and yet there's still crime in our communities at a high rate.
Thank you so much. Now we will get into the next portion of our town hall, and that is we have some audience questions for our candidates. Our first question is, what are some potential policies that you all have in place to address and remedy the current gender wage pay gap in not just our state, but our nation? And any candidate can respond.
We believe in our campaign, Mr. Chambers, and the campaign believes in equal pay for equal work. Obviously, we also believe that every company that receives federal funds should be subject to auditing to make sure that there is equal pay for equal work. Currently, as we know, there's a disparity in between what white males make between what a Black woman makes. That's unacceptable. So we believe that if there's federal funding that is tied to your corporation or your business, that you should be subject to auditing to ensure, to make sure that we have equal pay for equal work for all people.
Yeah, you gotta pay people what they're worth. Simply as that. Pay people what they are worth for the same work that they're doing. But we need to also make sure that we're supporting mothers as well and expanding what childcare looks like, because we have a lot of mothers who are also working that needs someone to watch their child while they make a living. So we need to expand childcare. Also, simply passing this federal minimum wage increase and this tip minimum wage increase. You have a lot of parents in this district, especially who work in the hospitality industry, and it directly affects and impacts them. And so I fully support equal pay for equal work, because in all things we need to make sure that we are forward moving and forward thinking, and not just our ideologies, but actually making sure that what we draft and what we envision actually comes to pass. So we got to learn to start paying people with their worth and advocating from from the pulpit on the congressional floor to do just that.
Yes. So absolutely, there should be equal pay for equal work, and I'm against discrimination in all forms, whether it be race, gender, sexual orientation, military status, neighborhood you live in. Equal pay for equal work. It really can't get much simpler than that.
Great. First, we're going to move into another sector that is candidate-specific questions. I'll start with Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, earlier during the town hall, you suggested doing away with standardized tests such as the ACT and SAT. Until this is done, do you believe there is a way we can incorporate standardized testing curriculum preparation such as ACT testing preparation and SAT testing preparation into our school curriculums so that our Louisiana students can receive more funding for post-secondary education?
I think that was actually a Mr. Thompson thing. So I think that you want to yield that question to him. I do support abolishing standardized testing as well, but if you were directing that question to him, I would love to grant him the opportunity to answer.
I can direct it to Mr. Thompson.
I'm sure you will, brother. Hey, can you guys ask me the question again? Once I heard Mr. Johnson, I kind of checked that. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that we can incorporate ACT and SAT and all standardized testing preparation into our school curriculum so that Louisiana students can receive more funding for post-secondary education and be better prepared for post-secondary education?
You guys hear me?
Yeah.
I want to be clear about this. And the position of Mr. Chambers in our campaign. Standardized test is culturally and linguistic bias, and we know that it has a disproportionate effect on our children, on Black children. Again, the district is 65+% African American, and so when we talk about standardized testing, we are for the abolishing of standardized testing, right? You're seeing around the country, large institutions, Harvard, Yale, Ivy League, UCLA, they're doing away with having a requirement where you have standardized testing. But to answer your question directly, we are absolutely for federal funding of our schools to make sure that people receive SAT prep. We believe that one's social economic status should not be tied to those resources. So if the standardized tests are there, the ACT, SAT is there, then you absolutely should be giving prep to prepare for those tests. You guys, look, I have to hop off. I have another call after 10. Mr. Chambers does apologize for not being here, but he sent the person who he believed that can answer questions directly. It is not that we don't take your vote important. We don't think your vote is important, but I have another engagement I have to attend to, and so we want to give you guys the consideration that we just felt to deserve. We thank you for the opportunity. We hope that you guys come out to participate in phone banking for us. Again, it is early voting. Regardless of which way you vote, participate in the process. And we thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. We're going to allow any of our remaining two candidates to answer the question that I just proposed to Mr. Thompson. If you all need me to repeat the question, please let me know.
Standardized testing is just as he said, it's racist. That's just what it is. Was to serve as another barrier for opportunity. And so while I do support the abolition of standardized testing, it's imperative that we are drafting curriculum to support our young people that's not even going to yield just to a standardized test, because you learn so much more. There's so much more beyond that. Overall enrichment, yeah, but they change those tests every year. Even though you can try to keep a pattern as to what they'll do and how they'll move with it, is always something that's going to come up in the short term and to throw it all off. And so that's why I'm even going to further advocate for the College for All Act for federal funding to be allocated for public education and for public college. I mean, we need to grant people accessible opportunities. We need to close wealth gaps, because everything, all of this, all has to go back to racial justice. And unfortunately, it's always the Black person who is at the very much so end of the receiving end of any type of advancement in life. And so I place no limitation on the arena of standardized testing. I do support educational and enrichment. Overall, which is not even dedicated specifically to the test, because the test itself is not the issue. You got to understand the strategy behind it. And when you understand strategy, that's the greatest thing versus the content, if you will, because there's a way in which they're developing those questions and asking those questions in a way that certain communities may not be able to understand it. And so this is very much systematic, but I do support, again, the abolition thereof, and of course, federal funding by public systems.
Just so that I answer the question, can you mind briefly just repeat the question?
Yes. Do you believe that we should incorporate the ACT prep and SAT prep and the other standardized testing prep into our curriculums so that Louisiana students can receive more funding and be better prepared for post-secondary education? What's your stance on that?
Absolutely, yes. We need to be able to compete on a national and worldwide platform. So standardized testing doesn't necessarily need to be used to compare each other and for funding purposes, but we need to make sure that we don't teach the test, but that people that are learning, students that are learning in school, they are learning the concepts that are tested in these standardized tests that are used both nationally and globally. So yes, I absolutely do believe they should be included and not taught too directly, but the topics should most certainly be included.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to another audience question. What policies do either candidates have developed or in place to remedy the lack of proper rehabilitation services, mental or physical, in our Louisiana prison systems? And either candidate can respond.
Yeah, as it pertains to direct policy, as of right now, I would love for somebody to assist me in drafting one. But nonetheless, we need to make sure that we are placing humanity into each individual. And so regardless of one's status as it pertains to being incarcerated or not, we need to prioritize people's health in all things that we're doing as it pertains to a medical practice. And so it's unfortunate that because one is incarcerated, that one is not treated right for mental health or for physical health ailments. We need to make sure there's tighter and stricter regulations in these prisons. We need to make sure that we're not advocating for privatized prisons, but we actually advocating for the funding of privatized prisons, because this is an investment when people do these things, and not building a medical jail or a mental health jail, but actual treatment facilities, right? So we need to make sure that we are even having these people incarcerated for even a cause or whatever that may be, outside of something that would simply be a mental health issue or something that they may not be able to understand. But it's very much so paramount that we're placing humanity in all people, regardless of situation, and that they be attended to directly and as urgently as somebody who was not in a cell. So we need to prioritize the health of all people.
So, yes, both mental health and physical health are critically important. These are supposed to be either one of two things. These are either rehabilitation facilities that you go to once you are convicted of a crime, or they are nothing more than an institution that you're in up to including going to trial. Many of these people that are in these facilities have never been convicted of a crime, or they certainly are not there now because they've been convicted of a crime. It is not meant as a punishment. It's meant for rehabilitation. Mental health is critical in these facilities, just as it is critical outside of these facilities to make sure that we prevent people from making it to these facilities and take care of our homeless population and our most vulnerable people. People should not be dealing with feces or rape inside of these institutions. Right now, the standards at which some of these local facilities are operating are despicable. Some of these facilities are receiving federal funding while the inmates in the federal portion of the facilities are relatively well taken care of. While one pod over, there's despicable standards and inmates have to avoid feces in the same facility, but the other pod isn't receiving federal funds. We need to have better auditing. And again, when it comes to accountability, we need to hold everybody accountable, whether it be at a local, state, or federal level, or a private institution level. So absolutely, we need to up our game when it comes to physical and mental health.
Thank you. We have one last audience question that just came in. What potential policies do you have in place to lower the discrimination and raise equality for those in the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, I've already come on record earlier in this discussion and stated that everybody should be treated equally. There is no excuse to treat people differently based on race, your ethnicity, sexual orientation, or many other factors. There should be equal work for equal pay, and discrimination, it upsets me that we're even discussing it's required that we're discussing discrimination here in 2021. We should be in a different era. We should be worried about technology and other issues, but unfortunately, we are discussing race. You know, it's very upsetting that I'm the only Republican here in this forum even willing to address these issues head on. So, but not to make this a partisan issue, but this is utterly ridiculous. This should not be an issue. Everybody needs to be treated equally.
Okay. Simply, I tell people all the time, Congress needs to pee or pee Congress because there's something called the Equality Act, and Congress needs to pass the Equality Act. It's already drafted. It needs to be supported and it needs to pass. So the Equality Act seeks to amend legislation and laws already in existence, seeking to amend it to explicitly include language to protect people on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Currently, there are no federal laws on the books that is protecting one from housing discrimination, public accommodations protections, employment protections, educational opportunities. There is nothing on the books to prohibit that type of discrimination. Actually, there was a state on today that had prohibited transgender athletes from participating in sports programs. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's already an act that's already drafted in place to protect the members of the LGBT plus community. And we need to make sure that we are advocating to fight and to support the Equality Act by all means and at all costs.
We now have a special treat for the audience. In our remaining time, we do have one more audience question left, but before that, we will do something just for the audience. We will allow each candidate to ask the other candidate one question. The opposite candidate will have 3 minutes to respond to that question. This question can be from anything that the candidate said beforehand in the town hall, or just any inquiry you all may have on behalf of each other's campaigns. Would anyone like to go first? I can just pick Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you will have time to ask Mr. Lorette one question. Ms. Lorette, you will have 3 minutes to respond to the question that Mr. Johnson asked, and vice versa.
That is funny. Y'all are funny. That's funny. That's funny. Greg, you are the only Republican here that is present right now. And of course, the 2nd Congressional District is overly consumed with Black residents and Democrats. how will you prioritize the needs of the Black community?
First of all, I do agree that that was a that was an interesting twist to it. And by the way, this is the first time I've had to speak to you directly, and I've been very impressed by you. So, but obviously, I'm running in a primarily Black Democrat district. That was no secret to me. But as I've already stated, we have been underprivileged in this district for so many years. When I lived in DFW, when I lived in Dallas-Fort Worth area and other areas, being a high-tech guy, like I said earlier, I referred to us as being 20 or 30 years behind the times. And it's very upsetting to me. I'm a very high-tech guy, and it's upsetting that people do not know how to get on Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams or whatever the technology might be. But we are underpaid, underprivileged, and as far as being Democrats concerned, you know, to give some credit to my other Republican opponent that's not here, I give him some credit because I do believe that Democrats have gotten the raw deal and kind of been somewhat misled over the years in terms of their party affiliation. I believe that's changing. But one of the things that I'm going to do specifically, as I stated earlier, is besides have opt-in antibodies testing so that we can reopen our economy and put more people back to work, is have that mobile office that's going to go around parish to parish and meet with people that don't necessarily have the ability to travel to a district office. And if people don't have the opportunity to meet with that mobile office, like I say, we're going to, if it's appropriate for them to meet with a congressman, we're going to ship them a tablet and let them have those congressional meetings. But again, I'm the only, not just am I the only Republican here today on this forum, I am the only America First candidate. And what that means is, although I'm a military veteran, a proud military veteran, I am in favor of spending money in America first. And that includes grant money that can come from money that we're saving because we're not sending it overseas. Not that the money's not well spent overseas, but we can better spend it in the US today. Thank you.
Mr. Lorette, you now have the opportunity to ask Mr. Johnson a question. Mr. Johnson, you will have 3 minutes to respond to Mr. Lorette's question.
Well, I'm going to get a little bit more personal with you. Don't worry, it's going to be a softball question, okay? But I've received multiple comments from my constituents, from my donors and so forth, about your age and your enthusiasm. I would just like you to take a minute on a little bit more on a more personal level of what made you decide to run as being one of the youngest candidates to be running for this position. I'm really interested in your personal viewpoints on that.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good question, especially it's appropriate for this opportunity with the young people who are involved in this forum. I am 25 years old. I did qualify to run for Congress at 24 years old. The legal minimum to run for the seat is 25. When change it needs to happen and when change needs to occur, historically, we look at the young people. So when I'm looking at the civil rights era, or when I'm looking at even the Jim Crow era, or looking at the desegregation of a pool or a lunch counter sit-in or anything like that, or when I look at a John Lewis who got his head bashing at 15, 16 years old, when change needs to happen, it happens at the hands of the young people. Why? Because we understand that we need change, but we also understand the urgencies of now. And so for individuals who don't understand people's lived experiences, or who don't even have the thought or the mindset to expand to try to understand someone else's lived experiences, there's a great opportunity for someone to choose another profession and do something else. So right now we need to make sure that we are empowering and emboldening young people to be courageous and to stand against the fight. I've long been in service and in volunteer work and in grassroots organizing for eons at this point, though given my age. So this is not anything new to me. Being a servant of the people is very much so true to me and who I am. I come from a service family, but when we need to enact change, there's an urgency of now that we cannot move in a moderate capacity. And so my age is just so happens to be that, my age. However, I'm very much so qualified to be in this race. I'm very much so endowed with the research of both the data of the people and the data of statistics to create the precipice for my issue areas and to come to solutions that may be proposed, because I'm very much so issue driven, but I am solution based. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity to support and encourage other people, but to also highlight areas that would have been otherwise neglected had I not thrown my hat in this race.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to run on the same ticket as you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much. So now we'll get into that very last audience question. And that is, are there any plans in place or in the works for the utilization of vacant property spaces to provide shelter for the homeless?
Just do it. Nike said, just do it. I don't understand why we have so much, we have housing stock right now by housing and urban development that is vacant right now, that nobody should be on the street, regardless of even future development plans or proposals. We have so much housing stock right now that everybody would have a place to lay their head. But due to barriers and systemic constraints, we're playing ping pong with people's lives, and I have an issue with that. Now, when we are looking to develop and create spaces that are directly allocated for our houseless population, because I would never describe them as homeless. Home is where your heart is, but these folks are unhoused and need habitation. I support the development of a community that does not support the reacclimation of one moving in a houseless capacity. And what I mean by that is that the word recidivism is often used so one does not become a repeat offender. And so in this case, I don't want one to encounter recidivism in the realm of going back to a houseless state of mind. So I support a development that is going to support with overall housing, aside from the things that we have now. Because I tell people all the time, you didn't have the need for so many advocacy groups and organizations if we were actually legislating correctly on behalf of the people. And so with the Louisiana Housing Corporation, we already have tax incentives for developers. We need to make sure that we are contracting developers who are already here, who live here. So we're granting economic opportunities for those individuals as well. But we need to also prioritize funding to expand what housing looks like and what does houseless recovery look like as well. But there's been another state that's already, what is it, Texas and Austin, where they have already bought hotels to accommodate folk. I mean, we need to follow comparative models and see how we can make that work for us. There's no excuse. We're in the United States of America. No one should be on the streets. And houselessness does not limit itself to one being on the street. We need to understand that as well. So prioritize the people in all things, put the people first, and make sure that we're putting housing first.
So I believe first of all, I completely agree that we need to take these vacant properties or some of the blighted properties, tear them down and build more housing without a doubt. And I've gone on record as talking about this before. I believe in a phased approach. First of all, again, being the only what I refer to as America First candidate on the ballot, I believe in spending money America first before we send it overseas. I believe in as I just said, a phased approach. That goes from transitional housing, where we have some degree of monitoring. People that are living in transitional housing should be held somewhat accountable, whether they just were previously incarcerated, or maybe they just came out of a treatment facility, or they're currently in a treatment facility, some level of monitoring, and then they phase in to a different level of housing, to the point where we should be encouraging people through training and through education to obtain decent jobs, and hopefully to one day home ownership or a mixed income living type of situation. But I absolutely agree. When we're driving around, we see these empty lots, and we're sending money for overseas issues, which, while valid, they're not America first. We need to end homelessness, and we need to end it right now. And our vacant lots and our blighted lots are a key part of that.
Thank you two so much for your responses, and thank you for being here today. Thank you for your responses to all the questions that we have asked today. As we come to the end of the conclusion of our town hall, we would like to open up the floor for the opportunity to give you, both of you, closing remarks. We're going to ask that you please limit these closing remarks to 1 minute long. We will now begin with the closing remarks with Mr. Lorette.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me here. I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, my name is Greg Lorette, number 11 on your ballot. I'm the only America First candidate running. I'm also the only Microsoft certified person, I believe, running, who is a computer solutions architect. I'm bringing solutions to Washington. I'm a military veteran. I'm not the only one of those. There are a couple other military veterans running. I'm the military veteran, cybersecurity expert, solutions architect, bringing solutions, going to take care of my constituents first. One thing I will not be doing is following the party line. Unlike my Republican endorsed opponent, I do not take directions from the party, the man. I am going to take care of everybody. I'm going to take care of all communities, regardless of sex, race, or sexual preference or ethnicity. I ask you to give me consideration. Check out my website, lorettecongress.com. Thank you so much for having the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
All right, NAACP. I'm so excited to have had the opportunity to be with the young people of the college and youth and college division of the NAACP for the state of Louisiana. And as a past president of one Dillard University's branch, I'm really esteemed to have the opportunity to have engaged with you on tonight. And I'm really excited for what the future of you all's future looks like. But nonetheless, keep going after what you deserve and don't let anything come in between you and what destiny has in store for you. The people are tired and the people have been tired for too long. And we have been indulging with politics rather than people. And we have been looking at corporations rather than cooperation with people. And so it's about time that we prioritize the people. Hashtag prioritize the people and all things that we are doing. My issue areas and who I am as an individual far aligned too greatly with the people of the now that would sway me any way other than to advocate for the advancement of the people in Louisiana 2nd Congressional District. And so once again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to have come before you all today. For more information about me, you can follow me on all social media platforms at JCJFORLA, JCJ4LA. And you can also visit my website at JCJFORCongress.com. I'm number 8 on your ballot for new beginnings, and I'm fighting for we the people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our candidates for joining us today and using our platform to amplify the voices of youth across the state and especially in Congressional District 2. I would like to thank our audience, especially our Zoom audience, for holding it down and staying with us and really wanting to educate yourselves before going out to the polls. Don't forget that early voting has already started and it ends on March 13th, which is this Saturday, and the general election will happen on March 20th. Go ahead and vote early. Use your Go Vote app to check your status, as well as find your polling precinct. And of course, make sure that you follow us on our social media pages to keep up with all things youth and college for the state of Louisiana. Again, thank you all again. Thank you to my team for everybody that had a hand in putting this together. Our students from LSU, Xavier, Dillard, Loyola, as well as Southern University, the home team. And we truly appreciate you all coming out. We hope to see you guys next time.
Thank y'all for having me.
Have a good night.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Have a great night.